Before we discuss the StarShip universe with all of its amazing characters and incredible heroes, I would like to take a moment to offer well wishes to the real-life heroes fighting for their lives, liberty, and freedom in Ukraine. From President Zelensky to the Ghost of Kiev, to every Ukrainian, both military and civilian, we pray for your safety in these trying times.
And now back to the podcast.
One thing I haven't really thought about at all is the swamp planet.
I was thinking to do a swamp planet as well. Do you want to do that one?
Yeah, let's do it. I think we can come up with something good. If we want to do a little collaboration, we can just take the swamp planet.
Okay, that sounds good. Let's do it. Welcome to the StarShip Writers Room, a podcast that gives you an up-close look at the creation of the StarShip universe.
We talk new characters, hash out plot points, and imagine possibilities that are truly out of this world.
And which you might see featured in the StarShip NFT game,
a play-to-earn cryptocurrency game set in outer space.
I'm Melanie, the StarShip lore champion, joined by my co-host and fellow StarShip lore creator,
Spazzitron of CryptoPhoenix.org.
We've also got StarShip CEO Matt Albright here with us today. Welcome, Matthew, and thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you for having me, Mel.
Yes, and Tron.
Happy to be here, Mel.
Yes. So we want to start off this episode just talking about one thing that inspired one of us this week, especially as it might kind of contribute to the lore creation. So I have been the one to draw the short straw, and I thought this was really inspirational, something that I read from the book Wonders of Life with Brian Cox, who is like my personal hero. Basically, the passage is, deeper understanding confers that most precious thing, wonder. A sky filled with tiny twinkling lights is one thing, but a sky filled with other worlds is quite another. I have known this virtually all my life because I have always been an astronomer at heart. I realized that I now felt precisely the same about a single blade of grass. So I just love that about, earlier in the chapter, he was talking about, how you can kind of look at things as a poet, and a poet was saying that to explore things in a scientific way takes away the beauty. And then the scientist replied, no, it adds to the beauty. So that understanding confers even further wonder than just, seeing something on a surface level.
That was pretty mind-blowing. I love that.
I like that a lot. That was wise words and written beautifully.
Yes, yeah, totally. It reminds me, I love that. I feel like we all kind of look at the world differently, and it really kind of, it really captured for me that all of those different perspectives are, totally just contributing to, they're all valid expressions and interpretations of like how we see the world, whether it's through maybe a more artistic lens or, scientific or spiritual, or a combination of all of those things. So it's like super, super fun.
Speaking of seeing the world through a spiritual lens, I'm starting to realize, I'm just becoming more confident in the idea that, we're on a path here, and it's just, we're unstoppable. And I'm talking about we as in StarShip. We've gone through some tough times, things that have happened where we thought it could, potentially be the end. But the movement that we've started here, and what we've created, and the culture, every single thing that may seem bad at the time is a blessing. And we always come out on top. We lose someone, we get someone 100 times better. We lose a team, we get a team 5 times bigger and 50 times more experience. And that's been our reality since we started. I know that we're onto something here, and I know that the universe accepts it and supports it. And there's nothing anybody can do or say to stop that. And I'm so confident in that statement. It's really comforting for me to have that confidence. So I love it. Thank you, universe.
Yes, thank you, universe. I totally agree. I think, and also just like, yeah, I totally agree with that sentiment of just feeling more comfortable with expressing it. That's definitely something that like I relate to as well. And I definitely feel, as you know, I've been working with StarShip, that it totally feels like that, just that the universe is like supporting and guiding me. And then also it's even way bigger than me, you know, and it's all of us together. It's really cool.
That was really well said, Matt.
Thank you. They, they try to hire me all the time to come and give speeches, but, they can't afford me.
Mm-hmm.
maybe once your schedule clears up a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, if only. So we're going to do something a little risque this episode. I'm a little nervous. I don't know how you guys feel. Basically, this is not pre-planned. We, don't know what's going to happen. It could go really well or it could go another way, but we are going to brainstorm a planet. So that means we're just going to think about like the general description of that planet type. We're going to think about a planet of that type that could be in the story and the creatures or life forms of that planet.
I'm excited.
Sounds good. I love it.
Excellent. So yeah, this will be fun because the listeners can see how weird and fun the creative process can be. So I'm really excited about that. And yeah, we had like a little moment of serendipity where definitely Tron and I were on the same page, and we thought we should brainstorm the swamp planet.
Yes. It's one of the few planets that we don't quite have anything going decided in stone yet. So it's pretty much sky's the limit. We can do whatever we want and see how it turns out.
Yes. Yeah, totally. So where do you want to start?
Well, so I've been thinking about it in the last 90 seconds.
Yeah.
It seems so in the swamp, it's not like a grassland where you can have creatures that become, these giant hulking things that kind of, are apex predators and things like that. Everything in the swamp that can survive in the swamp survives through guile or something like that. You're not, there's no elephants in the swamp. You got, bugs and amphibians, and you could really do a whole, if we go into like a sentient race or something. We don't have anything that's amphibious adjacent, so that would be interesting to do.
Yes. Yeah. I'm picturing like this character that already exists, and it's like kind of webbed fingers. It is a humanoid, which doesn't necessarily have to. This is like literally just what came into my mind, like a humanoid with webbed fingers and toes, and like green. And is it a kind of frog thing, or what's going on there? I don't know.
Well, it could. I mean, yeah, that would be good. There's a lot of insects in the swamp, and they're like almost all like I'm thinking, like wasps and things of that nature.
Oh, mosquitoes.
Mosquitoes, wasps, leeches. A lot of this. Yeah. Well, you could have let me think. You could kind of combine I could see like a nest of like winged leeches.
Oh.
That would be kind of nightmarish.
Yeah, what would they do? Like, imagine being a visitor. What would happen if you came across a swarm of winged leeches?
Well, you could, Go ahead, Matt.
I'm not so concerned with leeches, but mosquitoes. I'm from Florida, so we know a thing or two about swamps.
Yes.
And mosquitoes are awful. And then you have water moccasins. Those are nasty too. You have them. You have to worry about your dogs and your animals and
huge spiders.
Yeah, spiders are bad too, but mosquitoes.
Yeah.
You know about mosquitoes, I think of like dengue. And I was in, I also happened to grow up in Florida, and I dealt with mosquitoes, but I never really was afraid of them. But then I went to Bali, and, when I was doing my research, I was like reading up about it, and they recommend that you get a shot if you want to, like, protect you against dengue. And I was just like, I didn't end up getting it, but I was like super afraid of mosquitoes. So it was just really interesting how I grew up all my life with them. And then I just was like super afraid of getting dengue suddenly.
Yeah,
so it could be like something like where the mosquitoes are carrying something that's really harmful to the visitors.
Wait, so what's Bengay?
Bengay is a cream, I think, that like heats up and for sore muscles. I think that's what it is. But dengue fever is something that mosquitoes carry, and it's just like makes you super sick. Like my friend had it, and she was just out for the count. She had a horrible fever, just sore, like her whole body was sore. Some people actually die from it.
Yeah, unmedicated, it has a scary death count.
Mm-hmm.
In the later stages, it can produce lockjaw, hypertension. It's not a pleasant way to go.
Mm-mm. No.
Now, as we move up from the floor of the planet up into the trees, a lot of the the pretty birds that you see in documentaries actually come from the sort of swampy areas, right? Like, so you could have the bottom layer is all like the kind of like gross things that slither about, and then up in the trees though you can have the beauty to contrast the ugliness of the swamp.
I love that. I feel like there's this kind of theme that I keep noticing that is coming up across like a lot of the different planets. That's like, it's like the surface view, and then like you get a little closer and it's just you see it underneath the surface, and then it's like, oh goodness, what's happening here?
As a matter of fact, if there was a sentient race, it'd probably be avian, up above where they could like actually progress and like evolve free of the decay.
That's what I was thinking, because a lot of people don't realize, bats are a big thing around the swamp. They're just, having a heyday with the mosquitoes. So maybe it would be more like a bat-like avian creature.
Yes, and then that's really fun, like thinking about their senses, like how do they perceive the world? Like is their most keen sense their sight, and how do they even see, or is it another sense?
Yeah. Okay. They say bats have about the same. The blind is a bad thing is not true. They say that it's about even with the human eye, but with that and sonar and the ability to move in 3 dimensions, they kind of use both to fly decently.
Mm-hmm. I think that sonar is like super cool, and we could do a lot with that. Just like kind of, exploring different ways of like perceiving the world.
And if they're a starfaring race, the sort of equipment and ships that they would have would be completely different, because they could be powered via sonar instead of typical, voice commands or something. They could have more diversity with the way they communicate with their machines, if that is the route we wind up going.
Yes. So how big would these creatures be?
Well, there's always a critical point of how large something can be. its size of the planet. If it's mammalian, they're still going to be small because the amount of food that's required to power a body. If they're eating mostly insects, but if they have a little evolutionary tree where they're getting able to hunt larger prey, they maybe like, I'm thinking like less than 1 meter.
Mm-hmm. And then and they still have starships.
Yeah,
or
if we go that route,
something like they wear like a spacesuit and they can just kind of go to space in their suit. So that maybe the starship is like a kind of a colony of these bat-like creatures in their individual suits. So then they can kind of form this massive craft that instantly like individualizes. Like, so that kind of space attack could be super fun.
Yeah, like a swarm. Like if they have a ship, it's more of like a backpack sort of a thing.
Yes.
Yeah, I like that. That's pretty cool.
Okay. All right. So we've got some legs here going.
Yeah.
We're doing a thing.
And like maybe their first space exploration, like maybe they have a moon that's like super close, like it's in like what we'd call like low Earth orbit. So like their first space exploration was just them having a suit and getting like propelled upward and just like landing on their moon. That would be cool.
Yes.
Because if the moon was close enough, like, I mean, if you can imagine, like, this obviously isn't possible, but like you can imagine like a moon that's so close to the Earth that someone could just take like, like a plane to it, basically.
Yeah.
That is actually kind of curious to think about. How would a creature that can't see envision the universe? And what would motivate them to explore it?
Yeah. And any technology that they have is obviously like, it's not going to be geared toward aesthetics because they don't, if we have them be close to blind or to go with the trope, like have them be close to blindness, like there would be no aesthetics. It would be like the shape of things that are the aesthetics because that's how they can perceive the world.
Yeah, and the sound, like the sound reverberating off of things.
I don't think anyone's done that. Have you seen any movies or read any stories that explore that idea?
No, nothing like that.
It's really hard to relate to. That's interesting. I really like that direction.
Yeah, it's kind of like, all the boldest pieces of media help you relate to things that you might not be able to relate to, but that's definitely quite a step. We're swapping senses around and stuff.
Yeah, I think there's something there, and it can still be kind of. I feel like I've seen things where they like use a lens that's similar to like a bee's eye or something, or like another kind of creature of this planet's eye, where it's like looking. It looks at the world, but it sees more temperature rather than, I don't know, like whatever we see. But so it's like, so if you're looking out your window, you're going to see a lot of like oranges and reds and everything. Do you guys kind of know what I'm talking about? Like
thermal based? Yeah.
Yeah.
Like a thermal based vision.
Yes. But this could be like a sound based vision.
Yeah.
I think that's interesting.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, like the Predator famously sees like the infrared and stuff. So this would be a whole new level.
Mm-hmm. And it would be so disorienting potentially as a visitor, like with like kind of humans coming to this planet, and like how would they kind of, and can humans kind of get around this planet as easily if they don't? How does it affect humans' ability to get around this planet if they don't have the same kind of, senses that these creatures have?
The day-night cycle would be obviously inverted too, because like it doesn't matter if it's light or not.
Right. Yeah. So like, and I was thinking that these creatures could be nocturnal.
Yeah. Virtually all mammals are nocturnal. And this would be like sort of a bat-like thing. Yeah, that's cool. Now to go back down to like the ground floor, I'm thinking you could have something that's frog-like but sort of fish-like as well. That would be really fun for an artist to have like a sort of a more like a coelacanth, right? Like it can flap up onto the land to escape something, but it's also sort of it's like a fishy little frog of some sort.
Yes. Yeah, that would be fun. So what would that like? What do you imagine that kind of like? Is this going to be like a being that has motives, or
no? I'm thinking like just like an animal of some sort.
Yes.
Yeah, like because you could have a predicament where some sort of somebody from the Starship Nation or whatever, like they land, they don't even it's the daytime, so they don't see any of the little bat people around, and they kind of land and they're having to like fight through. You could do some like cool action scenes where like it's silent, and then this horrible thing like flaps up out of the water, and you could do some really cool stuff with that.
Yes. Yeah, that would be really fun. Like give it some tension.
Yeah.
What is that? A jump scare?
It could be a jump scare. Everyone likes a jump scare.
Oh, I don't.
But yeah, you could because that could just be a fun, even if it's like part of like the Fae and the Ronin sort of. I think the Fae and the Ronin arc will be a really great way to introduce planets, because okay, they have to, Pan wants them to retrieve this thing, and so you can get like a little taster of a couple different planets, and so you can kind of see them like macheting their way through like the underbrush and having all these little encounters, and then they like kind of happened upon this civilization, and maybe they can't understand it, but they got what they needed, so they take off, and then that can be revisited in the future.
Yeah, totally. I imagine it's like extremely humid, just like and hot on this planet.
Yeah, like that's sort of what I'm thinking too. Like it's maybe they can't even breathe the air, so like anybody coming from outside, that's like why this little society has been untouched so far, is because it's pretty inhospitable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that a lot. Like the air just being so thick that it's you can't even
like your skin like instantly gets waterlogged just from walking.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is what would a swamp planet look like if it was cold? Is that our glacier planet?
Well, I mean, the swamps do freeze over, and it just is like even more like, because I mean, anyone that's walked around in a swamp like as a kid exploring the woods or whatever, like it's kind of noisy, and then if you go back there in the winter, it's kind of eerie in the winter in a swamp, right? Because it already looks eerie, but it's just that, but dead silent.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah, I got it.
Yeah, for me, that's what I was thinking about too, is just the noise, like the croaks of the toads and everything. It's like this planet would be so noisy.
Yeah. It was always crazy because you could, I mean, like, as a kid, you're back in the woods, you take a rock, and if you just like toss a rock into the swamp, it's deafening. Frogs get all angry. You hear things flapping and crawling around.
Oh, it's so creepy. I just feel like you always have that sense that something's gonna sneak up on you,
Yeah. And it's but yeah, in the winter, when it's winter but there's no snow, that's when it's the weirdest, because it still looks like exactly the same, because everything's dead because it's a swamp, but it's just like no movement, no motion.
Yes. Yeah. Oh. Okay. So I definitely feel like kind of staying on the ground, there's got to be some kind of alligator inspired creature.
It could be like a scale. Well, no, it probably. Like a scale. To me, a scaleless alligator would be kind of like grotesque and kind of interesting.
Yeah. What kind of skin would that have? What would it look like?
It could almost be like look like wet leather.
Like a snake. Like, I mean, snakes have scales, don't they? But like a smooth skin like that. Do you mean?
Yeah, like almost worm-like, right? Because it'd have to be thick, right? Because that's how these things would have evolved as some method to not get eaten by the other insects and stuff. So, yeah,
like a huge lizard, basically.
Yeah.
But mean. I feel like I would want. I feel like they would have, like, this creature could have like, they could have some intelligence, like. And maybe they're the kind of natural foes of the bat-like creatures.
Yeah, that could be, or even if it was more like chimpanzee level intelligence, like like not technology, but just sort of like, or like almost like tribal of some sort. Because and that could be like a feud, right? Because then like the top dog bat people from the Bat Kingdom, they might have like over their mantle like one of the carcasses of this sort of grotesque alligator thing, and so it could go both ways.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I just imagine them being like super territorial and like good trackers.
Yeah,
and
you see
gotta
that
be
in nature.
good
Yeah,
jumper, like they like just leap out of the water and capture the bats. Maybe they get the little like children, and there's like a culture of fear around going down to the water.
Yeah, and it could because it could be a little bit more fish-like, and that could be the thing. It's like if a bat's like learning to fly and they kind of like don't quite make it, like this colossal thing like it jets out of the water and snaps it out of the air. Basically, swamps, like that's where all fossil fuels come from. I mean, like gasoline and stuff. That's all swamp that has been like consolidated. That's why they're called fossil fuels. But yeah. So you could like, depending on how advanced we want the species from up above to be, that could be their main thing. Like that could be like how they're staying alive, and that could also be like, even if we have them be like pre-industrial, like that's still like where all the stuff like for their fires come from and all the stuff. So that could be like tension of why they have to go down to get the stuff and fight all these scary. Yeah.
Say more about that.
Yeah, that's because I mean, well, fire is basically the central existence for all, like, I mean, as far as that's how we got our start. So that could be, even if they're like tribal, that's what they're having to go down and find like little reservoirs of like dried up swamp matter. That's sort of like that's how that's their fuel.
Yes. And then where does Kyanite come in, do you think?
I don't know if it needs to. We could have just an arc where it's like super low tech, right? Because if Faye and the Ronin crash land there or something, they don't have anything. So now we're used to seeing like blasters and lasers and stuff, and now they've got like sticks, and now everything, like we could have more of an arc where there's no technology at all, and have like a little primitive sort of different. So we could have a completely tonal shift.
Yes.
For like a small story.
I think that would be so cool. And also, so like this planet doesn't have Kyanite, and then it's introduced to the planet. So it's like that opens up the door for how do the life forms on the planet respond to having Kyanite introduced to them,
And that could even be, so like Arc 1, they're able to prevail and get their ship fixed and stuff, and like maybe a piece falls off. Like you could have a little plot device there, and then 10 arcs later, now they're a starfaring people, and that could be a story that could be told. Yeah, I'm kind of trying to keep everything broken down in arcs, so like as content occurs, it can have like a beginning, middle, end, or at least several so it can be broken into like readable pieces. But that would be cool. That would be a little cliffhanger. They take off, and one of the bad people, like waving them off, looks down and he sees like this purple chunk of metal or whatever it is, little gem. And then that could be, and then they come back and he's like the ruler.
Yes,
and
it totally like just transforms the whole.
Yeah. And things that had been like their greatest fears are now something that they go to the zoo to look at. It could be a total, everything suddenly leaps forward.
Right. Like the missing link is
Yeah. Yeah.
So we said that, the planet has a moon that's super close. Anything else about like the kind of nature of the planet that, and also kind of like the days, the seasons, the years, like what do you think about this?
Well, if the moon is super close, that would allow for like much more like tidal shift, which would be interesting because tidal shift in a swamp would occur if the moon was like substantially closer or substantially had more mass than ours does. So yeah, that could be, you could do crazy stuff. And that could be, again, like what drove this one species up into the trees to avoid some of the tumultuousness. As far as weather goes, I'm thinking it goes from like quite hot and humid to like frozen. Like maybe it's frozen half the time and warm half the time, and that's why during the warm bits they have to really push to gather as much of this fuel as they can to survive the winter.
Yes. Okay, so like in terms of, is their energy source like a sun?
Well, I mean, when I said like go to gather their energy source, I'm thinking like the swamp matter below, which they
Yes.
dry and burn.
Yeah,
And
but they're like the
yes.
planets. So because I'm thinking about the seasons, so it's going around a sun. I'm trying to think of how it would be like so that it's such a drastic like change, between the seasons.
Yeah, it would. I gotcha. So it would be more like how Neptune orbits the sun. It's like imagine like an egg-shaped orbit.
Oh, I love it.
And then the planet is like half the time it's quite close to the sun, and then half the time it's quite far away. If that makes sense. I'm trying to paint an image in your head. Yeah, so that's like I want to say it's Neptune is actually closer to the sun than like a lot of the other planets for a chunk of time, because it kind of whips around it. It gets kind of close to it, and then it shoots way, way away.
Wow. Yeah, I think that would be really cool. I like how you described it as egg-shaped, especially for this. I feel like because like all the amphibians and everything, there's going to be a lot of like shout outs to eggs.
Yeah, and plus like amphibians, and I don't know how this could tie in. A lot of amphibians can sort of hibernate, but it's not hibernate. It's like they freeze solid. Like during the winter, and then like so they almost like they like die basically, and then are like resuscitated as they thaw out.
So is that reminds me of like the cryo chambers?
Oh yeah.
So they could have some kind of technology. I mean, not even technology in the way of thinking of like machines or anything, but they could have some kind of mechanism naturally, like where they just like kind of put the pause button on.
Yeah. That would be cool. Again, like depending on like, and as they advance technologically, like to them like going into cryo, like instead of like humans, like they had to invent like a special cryogenic thing for them, they can literally just have a freezer that is like timed. Yeah, because like that would be something they've already adapted.
Yes. And I imagine like the person, whoever from, Faye would get stranded in winter, like maybe at the end of the winter. So she's thinking like, oh, this is just like a deserted planet. Nothing's going on here. And then she's also learning how to cope with the realities of the planet. And then as time goes by, things start to warm up and things start to just like get a little weird. She's hearing more noises, like the planet basically comes back to life. And then after she's had some time to cope with the environment, she has to change, like adapt to it being warmer, but by extension, she has to come like in confrontation with all of the planet's life.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be cool. The reason I like the idea of the Ronin being on the planet too is because he's like the wealthy guy that got off the Earth before everybody else did. And so like you're putting him in like, you know, Faye might even be sort of used to it, but for him who's never like, he's had a kind of a comfortable life. Suddenly he's like, you know, why it's cold? Why is it cold?
God.
You know,
like a city slicker. Just
yeah.
Yeah,
because up until this point, he's like the kind of like not soft spoken. He's kind of like the, you know, quippy, always has it handled. Like he helps rescue Faye. Like he's the one that you know he's always got it handled. And so suddenly you're seeing him in a moment of weakness, which could be played off to either be funny or kind of like moving, depending on
just
either way.
Kind of making him a little more like maybe relatable or laughing at his expense. And yeah, that's fun. I like it. So, okay, so we kind of see this planet as, in terms of its relationship to the other planets in the Starship universe, or to the rest of the Starship universe, we kind of see it as a place where there's not really much going on in the beginning, and it's, you know, it's kind of like where people might get stuck.
Yeah.
But then in people getting stuck there, it also introduces Kyanite, and that completely just sparks a transformation of the species on the planet.
Yeah, I like that. Like, yeah, I think that would be cool.
I think that gives us like, you know, a lot to kind of dig into.
Yeah, definitely. And we can because yeah, so say, you know, Kyanite happens and like, you know, 20 years later, like if we decide to like maybe advance the clock on an arc, like it's, you know, we could have an arc that takes place maybe, you know, 50 years in the future or something, or 100 years in the future. And like, you know, if we ever get to that point in the writing where we're saying, okay, right, we want to go 100 years in the future and have all, you know, new characters and stuff, they can then be rediscovered as like an up and coming starfaring race.
Yes. Yeah, that is fun. All right. Do we think of any like locations and landmarks or anything that might be interesting?
You could have like, you could pull like an avatar, and maybe like a lot of the bats live in like a one giant sort of a tree like structure.
Wow,
maybe.
I literally was just thinking like something about a tree. Like I feel like where it's like kind of worshipped.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It could be like such a big tree that it could even be like seen from space. Like it actually like from the top of it, you can actually see like the curvature of the planet. Like it's a giant thing, and that's where all the bats have kind of congregated.
Yes. Yeah. Actually, that makes me think of it like kind of if Kyanite does exist on the planet, but its kind of use isn't realized until the human intervention. So this tree, I feel like, maybe it's like got some Kyanite glow to it, and like they're obviously gravitated to it, you know, and they worship it, but they don't even like realize the extent to which they can be using it.
And their advancement over like the 100-year gap, we'll say, like it doesn't need to be all good. Like suddenly they're like it can be. I mean, it's not going to be all bad either. It's like technology now. Like they're going to be like more comfortable, and obviously they're able to be like a player in the universe. But it, you know, they can still be either remorseful at the loss of the previous way of life, or at least respectful of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, that's like that nostalgia. It really lets us explore that of like, you know, every single person, I feel as we get older, like back back in my day, like just kind of
Exactly.
Yeah, I like it a lot. Cool. Well, I think we've got definitely enough to get started. Do you want to stop here?
Let's stop here and let's see if the community has any more fun ideas.
Yes, I think that's perfect. And I know they will. They're probably, I imagine them like listening to this and like kind of shouting at us like, no, this, like it's obviously this, you know?
Yeah, as we're struggling to find like the words to say what we're thinking, they're like, yeah, they've got like 10 pages written down already.
Yeah, they're finishing our sentences. It's going to be so fun to see what they come up with. Before we close out this episode, we want to shout out some community members who sent us their ideas for the Starship lore. First up, we've got Major Hassel and Kiwi Down Under, who you might remember from the last episode. Major Hassel submitted another snippet of what his imagination came up with to explain why we earn Kyanite while sitting at a space station. Meanwhile, Kiwi Down Under sent us more on the themes he found particularly interesting that the Starship lore could really explore, including how wealth would influence who would be able to have an organic human experience in a world where digitized consciousness is the norm. The idea that DNA increases in value the longer it's around, and what a so-called disembodied world may look like. Thank you so much, Major Hassel and Kiwi Down Under, for giving us so much to mull over. Finally, Dritz submitted an awesome scene idea featuring a character named Wilbur, who is born in Hohenwald, Tennessee, and who makes moonshine that you can drink or you can use to boost the speed of your starship. Wilbur spends the day making moonshine and ends the day with a police chase that sees him driving his F-250 into a large container to evade his pursuers. He falls asleep, and here's what happens when he wakes up. When Wilbur woke up, the container was closed, and he couldn't open it. He laid on his truck horn before pounding on the container. Finally, it opened. Wilbur could see a man in a Starship uniform who later told him that he was the first ever stowaway who had brought his pickup truck onto a Starship. What would Wilbur do?
I love that.
Isn't it awesome?
I love that so much. We got to add that.
Yeah, that was so much fun reading it. Just like, yeah, I love it. I love the countryman making moonshine, like just living his best life. And oops, I'm now in space with my pickup truck.
That's fun.
Thank you so much again, Dritz, for your submission. We really enjoyed it. And thank you everyone so much again for listening to this episode of the Starship Writers Room. We'll see you next time.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Starship Writers Room.
If you have an idea for the Starship lore, we would love to hear it, and you might even get a shout out on the pod.
Simply send it to lore@deploystarship.com.
That's LORE@deploystarship.com.
We hope you have a stellar day,
And we'll see you next week.